So you want to start getting into manga, but you also don't want to go into crippling debt, and trying to do so may be a trickier task than you might think. It all starts out so innocently. First, you start watching Jujutsu Kaisen, and once you run out of episodes in the anime, you're like, damn, that was great. Maybe I should go check out the manga. So you go to your local Barnes & Nobles and purchase maybe 1 or 2 volumes, and you start reading. And then, before you know it, you finish all the mangas you purchased that same very night, and it's now 3 AM, and you're cold sweating in your bed, going through manga withdrawal. You try to stay strong, but in a moment of weakness, you crack, hopping out of your bed and onto your computer, and you start looking at a brand new, sexy Jujutsu Kaisen manga box set. You try to justify it to yourself, thinking, well, I didn't want to retire that young anyways, and in one click, you spend your entire paycheck on some paper drawings, all because you thought Gojo was cool. Shameful. Guys, don't end up like this, okay? Start reading manga the correct way, a method that won't leave you with $0 in your bank account and 20 books on your shelf for a series you haven't even started yet. By following the 3 tips I'll cover in this video that I've accumulated on my manga journey, you'll be better equipped on how you should begin your own manga journey. But before we start, make sure to leave a like on the video. It truly does help out a ton being a smaller creator myself, and consider subscribing. I have a bunch of other videos on my channel about anime and manga, so if that's your thing, go check them out. I'm sure you'll like them. Okay, with that out of the way, here's my first tip, which is conveniently, I'd say, the most important one. The first step to starting a manga collection is to not start one at all. Guys, in 2023, there are so many cheaper alternatives for reading your favorite series rather than purchasing the books outright. Most people, with me included, can simply not afford to spend hundreds of dollars on a couple of books, so don't. Reading and collecting manga can be a very expensive hobby, but it doesn't have to be if you don't make it that. The number one thing I see a lot of manga collectors either forget or just dismiss completely is checking out your local library. This is by far the method that I use the most. As someone who grew up in the library, this is actually what got me into manga in the first place. You would be surprised by how many manga series your local library or school library probably covers, especially now with the medium only becoming increasingly popular. Just going and browsing my local library introduced me to so many great mangas over the years that I may not have checked out otherwise, like Ouran Host Club, Fruit Basket, and of course One Piece. If you're going to take one thing away from this video, I hope it would be this. Your local library is the most underrated asset in starting to read manga, although it does have some pretty glaring issues. One thing that I've consistently run into while starting a new manga at my library is whenever I start a series, someone always seems to have conveniently checked out the next couple of volumes of that manga that I needed, which is super frustrating. Or even worse, the library has the first couple of volumes but not the complete series, so you're basically stuck only reading half the manga. And this is where my next recommendation steps in. Start reading the manga online. A lot of great manga titles are completely free and available for you to read in the click of a button. Sites like Manga Plus have saved me dearly in times of crisis, like when I wanted to finish One Piece, but there was no way in hell I was shelling out what would have been in the high hundreds of dollars so I could catch up in the manga. Also, a lot of the stuff you can find online are done in color, which is a great touch. The colored versions are always my favorites. They just give that extra splash to the manga and make them feel more lively. Admittedly, this is not my preferred way of reading manga. Despite it being the cheapest and most convenient, I am one of the people who definitely prefer to read from a physical book, so if you're also like this, I sympathize, but sometimes it's just better to bite the bullet and read the digital version rather than fork out your paycheck for some mangas. When I got into Chainsaw Man, they sadly didn't have any physical volumes at my library, so this is where I utilized reading the digital version because I just wasn't gonna pay the outrageous price the manga was at the time. Also, JoJo would be a very good example for this because later parts in the series don't even have a physical version yet. As I said earlier, I definitely prefer to have actual books, but you should really evaluate on if it's worth it for you to outright buy them instead of reading online. But if you really just want to own the physical copies yourself, which I don't blame, it is nicer to have the books in your hand and not have to deal with, say, having to return them at a certain point to the library. I would suggest my number 2 tip: buy the manga used. This is honestly a tip you can use for pretty much anything you buy. I rarely ever actually buy new things because the markup on new items just doesn't warrant the slightly higher quality you get for the product. It just makes more sense to buy used. It's way more cost efficient. You can find crazy good deals when you buy used. I found markdowns of higher than 50% off retail prices, and with something like books, the used and new versions are not that dissimilar from each other. In the worst case scenario, the book may have a few tears on some of the pages, but the buyer will usually inform you of that in the listing. Sites like eBay, Craigslist, and my personal go-to Mercari all have thousands of listings of great mangas for you to buy in the click of a button. I would also totally recommend checking out r/mangaswap. I've utilized it a couple of times because they usually have really great deals on there, as well as the people there always being so kind and are usually willing to negotiate on their prices, so a lot of the times you can work them down to giving you a really amazing offer. Every single manga in my personal collection that I own myself, I bought used. It's just so much cheaper than buying new. I really can't warrant it when buying used is an option. But if you really just want to own your manga physically and also want the manga to be brand new, here's my third and final tip: look for deals. This option, no matter what route you take, is always going to be the most expensive way to buy manga, so I recommend using the tips I mentioned previously first. But if you really just want new mangas, always scout around the internet before you actually purchase it. Certain sites or stores may give you cheaper prices than others, so look through multiple before you make a purchase. Also, sometimes certain series go on sale at different times, like when there's a new big release, a lot of the time they might put the title on discount to pump up the sales, so this is also a big thing to look out for if you want to save money. Also, remember, buying in bulk is always going to be cheaper, so if you are really interested in a title you know you will probably end up wanting to finish, it's going to be much more cost effective to buy multiple volumes in a single set instead of buying some copies individually. Buying manga new should be a last-ditch effort though. The cons definitely weigh out the pros for this method, and I just feel like the other options are much more appealing, but some people just really love opening a fresh book out of the wrapping and smelling that new paper scent, which admittedly is pretty nice, so to each their own. Reading manga is a super fun hobby to have and a good stimulating experience for your brain, so just people reading it in general is a plus in my book, no matter the way you obtain it, although some options are a lot cheaper than others. But yeah, that about wraps up the video, guys. If you enjoyed, leave a like. As I said earlier, it does really help out as I am a very small creator. Yeah, consider subscribing. I have a whole bunch of other videos on my channel that I think you might like, so go check them out, and yeah, have a good one, y'all.